I beg your pardon. MOD policy 4 of 147 introduced a 3-tier process. Do you remember? You said you remember, I beg your pardon. I think I've got to get my act together. You did mention that you remember that testimony, am I right?
I do remember that testimony, Chair.
Chairperson, Commissioner Musi, for you to appreciate this testimony, because it's very critical, would like to project the testimony of this witness by way of a slide, so that this witness should simplify the 3-tier system and make you appreciate where the integrated project team played a significant role. Now, you'll appreciate this if you remember that we are left with only four competitors. Now we're in the process of gravitating to choose one. This witness will demonstrate to you the process that was followed, but what intervened that process, and how the MOD policy 4 of 147 played a significant role. At this stage, we are inviting you to come and join us so that it should be projected on the screen. Chair, Commissioner Musi, to simplify the testimony from now on, this will be qualified as slide number 8. The next slide will be number 9. The slide before that will be number 7. Now, in line with your testimony, remember we've laid the foundation that we are going to address MOD policy 4 of 147 that Mr. David educated us about, and its significance in relation to the role that the technical evaluation team played in as far as the RFO value system to weigh the offers of these 4 remaining bidders. Now, if you're to simplify this document before us, let's start here. Do you remember that Mr. David told us that this policy introduced 3 tiers, 3 layers? Am I right?
That's correct, Chair.
Now, for the sake of laying a foundation at the top, the document is Project Will's evaluation process.
That's correct, Chair.
That relates exclusively to the project dealing with submarines.
That's correct.
Not corvettes, not frigates, am I right?
Yes, Chair, only the submarines.
I would like you to simplify these 3 tiers to the commissioners. And do you think you will do it better by taking them from bottom up or up bottom? If we say bottom up, explain. If we say up bottom, explain.
Yes, Chair, I think it would make sense if I just started at the bottom, at the lower tier, because essentially the middle tier and upper tier doesn't come into play until the lower tier has finished their work. Essentially, you'll see here in the lower tier, I've got 2 steps. If I could start at the very bottom, the RPT as a whole was involved with the application of the value system insofar as the scoring implementation and the determination of the pre-normalized results, i.e. the technical performance, the basic results, if we put it that way. That's what the RPT as a whole was involved with.
Now, are you telling the commissioners that at this stage, with these 3 layers introduced by Policy 4 of 147, the only space in which the technical evaluation of the office using the RFO value system where your team played was only at the lower tier, number 3, the bottom one?
That's correct, Chair. That's the only tier that we were involved with.
Were there other teams in that lower tier?
Yes, Chair, there were. A similar process was followed in each of the individual SDP packages.
Now, let's talk about the teams other than your team. We know that your team was looking at the technical evaluation, looking at the military value. That one could simplify as focusing on these 3 important components that we still have to tell the Commission about, or simplify it for the Commission: the RFO, the integrated logistics system, and the product requirements. Am I right?
That is correct, Chair.
Were there other teams that were looking at the finances, financial option, or industrial participation in that lower tier?
Yes, Chair, there were. The slide here represents the military value, but coupled with that, there was a similar team that addressed the industrial participation. At that stage, if I'm correct in saying, there were 2 RP teams. There was a defense industrial participation team and a national industrial participation team. And then there was also a financial team as well, addressing the financial arrangements.
Now, we know the following. Your team was playing in that space. Your team was playing only in that space with the lower tier or tier 3. And there was another team in another silo looking at the industrial participation, which is divided into DIP and NIP. And then there was a team which was looking at the financial options.
That's correct.
Our focus is to look at what you were doing, what your team was doing. That is not finance, not industrial participation. Am I right?
That's correct, Chair.
Now, explain to the Commission what this policy did now. What changes did this policy effect with regard to your role as a member of the integrated project team?
If I understand you correctly, Chair, are you saying I must make a comparison to a normal process Arms Corps would follow, as opposed to the SDPP process? Okay. Normally, Chair, we wouldn't have these tiers. The project team would do a value system. The results of that value system, the value system report would then be forwarded under submission to an Arms Corps Board of Directors Authorization Committee for approval. In other words, our recommendation would go to Arms Corps BOD.
Now, you're saying to the Commission, in the space in which you play a role in the lower tier, Tier 3, as a member of the integrated project team, you do your assignment looking at the military value, considering these three important components, not looking at finance, not looking at industrial participation, and after doing that, you take the scores to a different body, isn't it?
That's correct. That is how it occurred.
Which body is it?
Chair, the project team as a whole was involved in doing the basic scoring in the value system. The results of that value system were then compiled into an RFA evaluation report. This report was written by the project officer for the submarine project, and it was moderated by the Director Naval Acquisition, both of whom had been seconded at that stage to the DAP division.
What happened which was not supposed to happen? Remember, we want to demonstrate to the Commission that MOD 4 of 147 introduced some changes. From your testimony, you were just focused on lower tier, Tier 3. That's where you end. You evaluate, you look at the military value, you look at these three important components, the ILS, Integrated Logistics System, you look at the product, submarine of the submarine, you look at the RFO. Now, something happened here, according to your testimony, that ought not have happened. Explain to the Commission. I apologize, Commissioners. Actually, I was going to direct him to DEP because from here, he's going to tell you what happened that brings DEP in. I think he's going there, Commissioner. You had the Commissioner's concern, and it's very important. Please simplify it for them.
Chair, DAPT stands for Defence Acquisition and Procurement Division. It was a newly formed organization which fell under the Ministry of Defence. And it involved itself with all matters relating to acquisition and procurement within the SANDF.
Who was heading it?
DAPT was headed by Chief of Acquisition, Mr. Shake.
Now, I know I'm taking you backward. What did the integrated project team do at that level where they are confined? What did they do?
Chair, if I could get back to, in answering that, your previous question, you asked what the differences were. Perhaps if I could elaborate on that. Essentially, before and after SDPPs, the procedure would have been the results of the value system. There wouldn't have been 3 tiers for a start, and also the result of the value system would have been put into a submission by the program manager to our board of directors for authorization with a recommendation for the appointment of a preferred supplier. That would be the next step. So there wouldn't have been the need to normalize results, because the normalization of results comes into the middle tier. You'll notice that there's a formula there which states best value is equal to the military value index plus the industrial participation index plus financial index. Now, to get those 3 indices equatable, you've got to normalize those results so that you can add them together. That wouldn't normally take place.
Now, before we even go to the second tier, I just want us to part ways with the last tier, the third tier where you played a role. Now, what has become clear is there was not supposed to be 3 tiers ideally before the MOD 4 of 147. That has become clear.
Yes, whether it was supposed to be or not, I can't say, but it certainly did change once that organization was instituted.
What happened ideally, or the way you testify, is that after the integrated project team has done its exercises of giving the points in relation to the RFO value system, the program manager would take those results to the board of directors. Am I right?
Under normal circumstances, that would be the approach, yes.
Explain to the commission what happened then. And I would like you to introduce the second middle tier.
In the case of Project Wills, the project team did the basic scoring. The project officer then compiled a report which was moderated by his superior, Director Naval of Acquisition. And that report had a recommendation with a military value index in it. That recommendation was then forwarded to the SOFCOM at the middle tier or level 2 tier.
The distinction that appears here is that SOFCOM received the results.
That's correct, Chair.
Did SOFCOM prepare the results?
SOFCOM made what SOFCOM did was it did a calculation after having received the 3 respective indices, the military value, the RP index, and the financial index. When it received those 3, it determined the best value.
Let me understand. I'm going to take you backward. Did SOFCOM prepare the results?
Yes, SOFCOM would have prepared the results and the outcome of the low tier values, and they would have made a recommendation to the next level.
But by the time SOFCOM received the report, I thought that from your testimony, the integrated project team has already made the results.
No, Chair. At the RPT level, we determined the basic results, and then there was an RFA evaluation report with a recommendation in which they had the military value results in. So yes, they did. And that was submitted to the SOFCOM for inclusion into their overall formula.
Just for my own understanding, as far as were they making any determination of any results, or their function was simple? Thank you. Were they working out any results, or was their function simply to consolidate the results which come from integrated project teams? Were they making those calculations, or was their function simply to consolidate the results that they've already received from the project teams? Thank you.
Chair, to the best of my knowledge, they performed a consolidation role. They grouped the 3 indices and they consolidated them for recommendation to the next level.
Now, to be specific, following up on the chair's question, we now know that the integrated project team determined the basic results, and they were sent to a moderator who took them to SOFCOM.
That's correct.
What did the moderator do before they went to SOFCOM?
From what I understand, after having read this evaluation report, The basic results were normalized. The pricing was brought into the formula and a military value was determined.
What was the last part? The military value was?
The resulting military value. The resulting military value, which arose from the outcome of that report, was then forwarded to the SOFCOM.
Now, this intermediate moderation took the basic results of the integrated project team, normalized those results. Am I right?
You are right, Chair.
Simplify, normalized.
Normalized is the procedure used to equate the values so that they could be added together with the other indices. You couldn't take the basic value and add it to the IP index and to the financial index. You had to convert it into a military value index so that it could be added, it would be compatible in that simple addition that you see there. They had to fulfill that process before you could add the three together.
By the way, this has got nothing to do with the integrated project team. It has done its spade work because it has given the basic results.
That's correct, Chair.
Let's look further what this moderation did. It dealt with the pricing of the formula.
Chair, I would like to state I was not part of that process that was carried out in that RFA evaluation report. It was done independently, and I would be speculating if I had to say exactly how the evaluation report arrived at a result. I wasn't involved with that process.
And it also addressed the result military value.
Yes, it did. It made a recommendation as to which of the four bidders had achieved the best military value index.
Now, remember, we are looking at the stage before it goes to SOFCOM.
I remember, yes.
Now, you told us that ideally, please correct me, I try to simplify things for myself, I'm not that technical. Ideally, there wouldn't have been 3 tiers.
Yes, normally you wouldn't have to consider the other indices, and therefore it would negate the need to have to convert and normalize the results.
Now, we know that from the basic results of the integrated project team, there was a moderating team that looked at these 3 aspects that we looked at. Now, remember, we are not yet at SOFCOM. But what does SOFCOM stand for?
I'm not sure, Chair.
It doesn't matter, don't worry. The commissioners have heard about it. The Strategic Offers Committee, they've heard a lot about it. Strategic Offer Committee. Now, at this stage, we know of 3 players. You have played at the lower tier, 3rd tier. Now, we know that there's a middle party that moderates before SOFCOM comes in. That has become clear.
In the case of Project Wills, that is how it was applied. Yes, Chair.
This middle party, is it tampering with the basic results that the integrated project team has prepared?
Not to my knowledge, Chair.
What does it do to those results?
The SOFCOM at the middle tier merely consolidates the outcome of the results arrived at by the lower tier organizations.
We're not yet at SOFCOM. We're at this moderating team. You mentioned, is it Mr. Howell? If I'm not mistaken, you've already mentioned the name of Mr. Howell?
Yes, Chair. It was in fact Admiral Howell, who was Director Naval of Acquisition. He did the moderation in that evaluation report, correct?
You also mentioned another name?
The other person who wrote the report itself was the project officer. I think he was a commander then. It was Commander Reed.
Commander who?
Commander Reed. He could have been a captain at that stage. I'm not sure when he was promoted.
Now, there are two names that come in, and from now on we'll start associating these two names with that, let me call it a team, between SOFCOM and the integrated project team. That's a team of Mr. Howell and we know that Mr. Howell moderates. We know that Commander Reed is a project officer. Now, what does Mr. Howell moderate?
Having seen the document for the first time recently, Admiral Howell signed the document as the moderator. His actual role, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I think he would be the only one who could possibly convey that information to the Commission.
Now, you keep on saying that as you've seen the document now lately, now that you are telling the Commission that you've seen the document, tell us what he moderates, that which was a basic result of the integrated project team.
Okay, the basic results contained the scores, the 4 scores, and these were then normalized. A process in which the values, the percentages of the scores are divided by the price. The one who scores the highest in that ratio receives a point score of 100, and the others receive a percentage against that winning score. I know Mr. Chrysler described this in some detail during his statement.
Now, that's what the moderator and Commander Reed did before they presented the basic results that the integrated project team prepared before SOFCOM received them.
That is the role that they would have carried out, yes.
The way I understand, now we're going to SOFCOM. What has become clear is that, if I may ask, was the integrated project team better qualified to give these basic results?
Sorry, Chair, better qualified in relation to what?
The tier in which they belong, the function which they discharge in that lower level, and the space in which they operated.
I wouldn't be able to comment on whether they were better qualified or not.
But I thought that that's what you told the Commission, that there, the integrated project team was looking at the military value.
Yes, the integrated project team worked within the confines of the military value, and they produced the basic score of the technical performance within the constraints of the value system.
And we also know that we are dealing with the RFO value system where we have to make a decision. We're no longer trying to eliminate. We have to make a decision. Am I right?
That's correct. They've got to motivate the preferred supplier in that report.
That's where I'm asking a question. This basic decision that the integrated project team made, were they better qualified to make it before it even went to the moderator?
I don't know on what basis I'd make a comparison to say that they would be better qualified, Chair.
I'm still advocating about it. Maybe let me just follow up on that question. Am I right to say the integrated project team consists of specialists in the in the various fields?
Yes, Chair, it does.
Consists of specialists in various fields, unlike SOFCOM.
Yes, Chair, it consists of specialists, including the project officer, the program manager, and the specialists assigned to the team.
Now, this, let's call the moderator level now. Were they better qualified to moderate?
Perhaps to try and answer that question, it's a difficult one to answer. You'd have to look into the background of the individuals involved. And those two gentlemen that I mentioned were both very experienced submariners in their own right. Both of them had commanded submarines in the past, so they certainly weren't strangers to submarines.
At the middle tier, where SOFCOM level is, how many teams play a role?
Chair, I'm not sure exactly what the SOFCON team comprised of. I think that was dealt with by Mr. Chrysler in some detail. I'm not that familiar with the workings of the SOFCOM team, as I was only involved with the lower tier.
We know the following. At the lower tier, where the integrated project team played a significant role, where it was focusing on the military value, underpinned on these three important components: the product of the submarine, the RFO, request for offers, responses, whether they meet and satisfy the letter and test of the staff requirement, and the integrated logistics systems, the spare parts, whether the submarine would still function. We know that your team, the technical team, played a significant role. But you also told us that there were other teams playing there, like the finance team and the industrial participation team. Am I right?
That's quite correct, Chair.
Let's push it higher now. We know that there's a moderating team that looked at the basic results prepared by the integrated project team that I thought you'd say it was better qualified to come with the results that it had. Now, we know that those results were taken to this important playing team of Mr. Howell and Commander Reid. Now, we're looking at the stage where it's being pushed higher now, to the second tier. How many teams are in the second tier? Do you have an idea?
No, Chair, I do not know the composition of the SOFCOM team.
I think my colleague understands where I'm going. Do you know whether the moderating team, let me call it the moderating team of Mr. Howell and Commander Reid, did they moderate the scores of the industrial participation team? Before I confuse you, we are at the lower level. What has become clear, and I think if this thing lands, then we'll speedily go up without a problem. We know at the lower level, your team, the integrated project team, was focusing on only the technical value, the military value. You had to know whether this submarine will satisfy certain requirements, and I'm going to take you to RM4 that deals with that aspect. But we also know that there was the industrial participation team, and there was also the finance team. I'm right, isn't it?
Yes, you are right, Chair.
Now, do you know whether the moderating team moderated the results of the industrial participation team?
Chair, the moderating team, consisting of Captain Reid and Admiral Howell, were involved only in the moderation of the technical performance of the submarine. and not in IP, and not in financing.
Now, let's look at the middle tier. Did the middle tier consider the technical aspect, the industrial participation aspect, and the finance option aspect?
Yes, Chair. The middle tier considered all three so as to arrive at a best value, which had components represented by those three indices.
Now, in that middle tier, there's only one player, that's Softcom, am I right?
Yes, there's one organization involved in the middle tier, and that's Softcom.
Now, where does it leave the moderating team?
At that stage, Chair, the moderating team had done their work. They'd made a recommendation regarding the military value index, which had been accepted presumably by the Softcom. So their role had been completed at that stage.
Are you aware of any formula that was being used by your team that could differ from the best value formula that was used by Softcom?
Chair, the RPT didn't apply a formula at their level. They merely arrived at the basic scores, which I will show you in a slide once given an opportunity. They didn't attempt to try and apply normalized scores so as to attain a military value index. They merely produced the scores as they were.
Am I correct to say, at the middle tier that we call the second level, where Softcom plays a role, the most important thing is the formula, am I right?
That's right. They apply the formula to the three indices.
And this formula is informed by two things. Let's go back. It's informed by the basic results that we've given and what the report of the moderating team, am I right?
Yes, that's correct. The basic results of the technical performance would have been converted into a military value index, and that would have been furnished to Softcom.
I know I could have asked you this question because I have to clear and complete now this second tier. I've got to go to the upper tier. Are you able to tell us whether, and I know that you might have responded to this question, the moderating team, when they provided Softcom with their report, did they interfere with the scores that the integrated project team presented?
It would be conjecture for me to comment on that. I'm not sure exactly what they did with those results. I can only assume that they didn't interfere with them, that they merely used those as a basic input to arriving at a military value index.
Now, we know the following now, that before this three-tier system was introduced by MOD, Policy 4 of 147. By the way, it was introduced during or about 2 July 1997, am I right?
That sounds right, Chair.
That's a note that I've made during the testimony of Mr. David Russell. I could be right too. Well, if we are incorrect, then let's talk about approximate. I think it was around July 1997. Do you vouch for me?
I don't have the information at hand, unfortunately, Chair.
Do you know who, actually before we even ask this question, let's look at what you say in paragraph 3.15, page 6. Page 6, paragraph 3.15. I would like to repeat what you say in line number 3. The value system was approved on 12 May 1998 by Mr. Shamim Sheikh, Chief of Acquisition. Now, let's pause there. Where did Mr. Sheikh play a role between the tiers that we've talked about?
Chair, there are two different considerations here. The first was the approval of the value system, and the second one, which is shown in this slide, is the actual consolidation of the outcome of the results of the value system. So going back in time, Mr. Sheikh approved the actual value system, which would subsequently be used to drive out a result.
Now, but that still begs my question. Thanks for that clarity. Where does he play a role in these tiers that we have talked about?
The outcome of the value system is directly related to the structure of the value system which was approved.
But that still begs my question. Let me be specific. Does Mr. Sheikh play a role in the lower tier?
If that implies that the approval of the value system is a lower tier activity, then yes, you can see it as that.
Does Mr. Sheikh play a role in the moderating role played by Mr. Reid and Admiral Howell?
Not to my knowledge, Chair.
Does Mr. Sheikh plays a role at SOFCOM level?
Yes, Mr. Sheikh does play a role at SOFCOM level.
Now, can we go higher now? Who made up the upper level?
I'm not sure exactly who makes up the upper level. I presume that consists of cabinet members.
I see that it's mentioned, the upper level is mentioned as strategic considerations.
Yes, that is how Mr. Creasel described it. It had nothing to do with the specific value systems. I presume, I can only make an assumption that strategic considerations applies to country-to-country commitments or discussions.
Now, with this clarity, I think I'm content it has landed on the commissioner, the role that the integrated project team plays, where they cut off, where the middle tier comes in, where the upper tier comes in. I think Mr. Grissel has been very clear that at the upper level, it's the cabinet where the politicians permit your executive authority decides and say for strategic considerations will link with this country to position South Africa. Am I right?
I would assume so, Chair.
Now, what has become clear also is that it appears that at different levels there are different players.
Yes, that is clear, Chair.
Now, looking at paragraph 3.15, I'm going to ask you a rhetoric question that answers itself, and you'll appreciate it when we go to the next leg of your testimony. Are you able to tell the role and the space in which Mr. Sheikh plays in as far as these three tiers are concerned?
Chair, I'm not sure if I can add any more than what I've already commented on with regard to Mr. Sheikh's role. His main role that he played here was at middle tier level, the SOFCOM level, where he consolidated the outcome of the lower tier results.
Looking at 3.15 again, between these three levels, are you able to tell where Rear Admiral Anthony Howell played a role?
Admiral Howell played a role in the establishment, the compilation of the value system, and also at moderating the scores, the evaluation report as well.
What tier is it?
That's at the lower tier.
But I thought that at the lower tier, please help me, unless you say you was part of the integrated project team.
No, there is a distinction, Chair. If you look at the lower tier, you have the integrated project team. And the results, the outcome of the value system was then passed on to Admiral Howell, who moderated those scores to arrive at a military value index.
I see. So it means you're saying that the moderating team of Commander Reed and Admiral Howell is at the lower tier.
It is at the lower tier, correct.
As you can imagine, the reason why I'm asking this question, I thought that at the lower tier, it is the technical side, that's your team that weighs the military value. There's another silo that looks at financial options, and there's another silo that looks at industrial participation.
That was not necessarily the case with respect to Project Wills, Chair.
Now, Vice Admiral Robert Simpson Anderson, on the 3 tiers, where does he play a role?
The Chief of the Navy played a role in terms of approving the value system.
Now, before we go to the other part of your testimony, having simplified this for us, because I was confused at one time. I thought that I would understand it better when we start. I thought that we start upper to lower, and I realized that it's easier when you start lower, upper. Am I right?
Yes, Chair, I think the logical approach would be to start at a low level because the upper levels are basically idle until they get the results that are obtained at the lower levels.
Now, we're parting ways with what we see on page 8 of your slides with this final question. Here's a parting short question. You testified that ideally there wouldn't have been 3 tiers. Am I right?
Chair, not necessarily ideally. I stated that there was a deviation to our normal processes in developing these 3 tiers. I merely pointed out that this digressed from our normal procedures.
Please tell us what would have happened if there were no 3 tiers now.
Chair, if there were no 3 tiers, the IPT would evaluate the scores of the value system, the basic scores, and the outcome of which would be forwarded with a recommendation to the Board of Directors of Armscor in order to obtain authorization to start a negotiation process with a preferred supplier.
Are you able to answer this question because it sounds unfair? Do you know why this 3-tier system was introduced with a view, here comes a question, bearing in mind that practically, let me not say ideally, from what you're saying, I've got to use words measurably and cautiously. Practically, your team, the integrated project team, after it is evaluated, done its assignment, those basic scores have to go to the Board of Directors of Armscor. That's what you're saying.
Yes, under normal circumstances, that would have been the case. However, these tiers were created to deal with the other indices that came to play in the adjudication processes. And that's what motivated the SOFCOM in generating the next tiers.
Are you able to tell us why the Board of Directors of Armscor don't appear anywhere here? It's an unfair question, I know. If you are able to comment, please comment. It does not mean they don't play a role, but what we see as far as these 3 tiers. Let's look at what we see. Looking at this document project wills evaluation process, we see nothing that tells us about the board of directors of AMSCO. Would you like to explain why? If you are able to.
Yes, Chair, you certainly don't see the board of directors featuring there per se. I couldn't tell you why the deviation took place.
Irrespective of these 3 tiers being in place, are you able to tell us whether somewhere the board of directors of AMSCO still play a role?
In terms of the SOFCOM process, according to my understanding, the board of directors didn't play a role in that regard.
Thank you. Let's look at paragraph 3.
Maybe this may be an ideal time, Judge. Before you go to paragraph 3.
Are we adjourning for the day or only for?
I think if we do adjourn now, we'll come back tomorrow.
Can do it.